The sun has not risen in 43 days. The elder stands at the entrance of his shelter, staring into a darkness so complete that the horizon has ceased to exist. The thermometer, if one existed here, would read -73 degrees Celsius. At this temperature, exposed skin freezes in less than 2 minutes. Spit crackles and turns to ice before it hits the ground. Breath becomes a cloud of tiny ice crystals that coat the inside of the nostrils with each inhalation. This is the reality of the high Arctic winter, a season that transforms the landscape into an alien world where the slightest mistake means death. For an exiled Inuit elder, survival in this frozen darkness is not a matter of luck or improvisation. It is the culmination of knowledge passed down through countless generations, a sophisticated understanding of physics, biology, and the subtle patterns of a land that appears lifeless, but teems with hidden resources for those who know where to look. The story of survival in such conditions begins long before the polar night descends. It begins in the late summer, when the elder, banished from his community for reasons that blend tradition and conflict, begins the methodical preparation that will determine whether he sees another spring. He knows that the coming darkness will last for months,
I've got enough for
that the
tonight.
cold will reach depths that turn steel brittle and transform carbon dioxide into dry ice. He knows that he must build not just a shelter, but a complete life support system capable of sustaining him through a season that would kill an unprepared person within hours. His first task is the construction of the winter dwelling. While many associate the Inuit exclusively with the igloo, the elder knows that for a long-term winter residence, particularly when alone and without the community support that allows for quick construction, a semi-subterranean structure offers superior insulation and stability. He selects a site carefully, looking for a gentle south-facing slope that will minimize wind exposure while maximizing whatever weak sunlight might appear during the brief twilight periods that punctuate the early and late stages of the polar night. The ground, even in summer, is permafrost, frozen solid just inches below the surface. Using a combination of stone tools and bone implements, he begins the arduous process of excavating. The physics of cold weather shelter construction are unforgiving. Heat loss occurs through 4 mechanisms: conduction, convection, radiation, and evaporation. The elder's design addresses each of these with engineering precision that would impress modern architects. He digs down approximately 1 meter into the permafrost, creating a pit that will serve as the main living space. This subterranean positioning immediately provides insulation, as the earth itself, once you penetrate below the frost line, maintains a relatively stable temperature. He shapes the pit with sloping walls, packing the excavated material into berms around the perimeter. These berms will form the base of the walls, adding mass that further insulates and protects against wind. The framework rises from this foundation using materials scavenged across the tundra during the brief summer months. Driftwood, carried by ocean currents from the boreal forests hundreds of miles to the south, provides structural elements. Whalebone, remnants of bowhead carcasses from successful hunts years or even decades past, offers curved ribs that can span greater distances than straight wood. He lashes these together using sinew, the dried tendons of caribou that become incredibly strong when braided and possess a unique property. They tighten as they dry, creating joints that actually strengthen over time. The frame creates a domed structure, aerodynamic in shape, presenting minimal surface area to the relentless wind. The walls are built in layers, each serving a specific function. The innermost layer consists of caribou hides, scraped clean of fat and stretched taut across the framework. These hides, with their dense, hollow hair, thus create the first barrier of insulation. The air trapped within each hair shaft is still, and still air is one of the best insulators available in nature. The elder knows that the secret is not just the fur itself, but the way it is prepared and positioned. The hides are oriented with the hair facing inward, creating a soft surface against which warm air can accumulate. Over this, he places a layer of moss and dried grass, materials collected in late summer from the few sheltered valleys where vegetation manages to survive. This layer is several inches thick and serves as additional insulation, while also providing a crucial function. It absorbs moisture. Moisture is the silent killer in Arctic survival. The human body, even at rest, produces water vapor through respiration and perspiration. In a sealed shelter during winter, yet this moisture has nowhere to go. It condenses on cold surfaces, creating frost that reduces insulation effectiveness and creates dampness that conducts heat away from the body. The moss layer acts as a desiccant, absorbing this moisture and holding it away from the living space. During brief periods of warmer weather, or through careful management of the shelter's ventilation, this moisture can be expelled, keeping the interior environment dry. The outermost layer is the most critical for wind protection. The elder constructs this from blocks of hard-packed snow, cut from drifts using a long bone saw. Each block is roughly rectangular, weighing perhaps 15 kilograms, and is placed with careful attention to the joints. Unlike the spiral construction of a temporary igloo, these blocks are stacked in conventional courses, set with each layer slightly offset from the one below. The gaps between blocks are chinked with loose snow mixed with water, creating a cement-like mortar that freezes solid and seals the structure against wind infiltration. This outer snow layer, typically 30 to 40 centimeters thick, provides phenomenal insulation. Snow is perhaps 90% trapped air, and this matrix of ice crystals and air pockets can insulate as effectively as modern foam. The entrance is perhaps the most sophisticated element of the entire structure. It is designed as a cold trap, using the principle that cold air sinks and warm air rises. The elder constructs a tunnel entrance that descends before rising into the main chamber. This tunnel, several meters long and positioned below the floor level of the living space, creates an airlock effect, where cold air flowing in through the entrance sinks into the tunnel and stays there, while the warmer air in the main chamber remains undisturbed above. The tunnel is also long enough and curved enough to block wind completely. Even during a blizzard, when the wind outside might be traveling at 80 kilometers per hour, the interior of the shelter remains still. A sealskin curtain at the inner end of the tunnel provides a final barrier, maintaining the temperature differential between the entrance tunnel and the living space. Inside the main chamber, the elder constructs a sleeping platform, elevated approximately half a meter above the floor. This positioning is critical for thermal management. The warmest air in the shelter naturally accumulates near the ceiling due to convection. By sleeping on an elevated platform, the elder positions himself in this warm zone, while the coldest air settles in the depression of the floor. The platform itself is constructed from flat stones gathered from the summer tundra, placed close together and covered first with a layer of dried moss, then with caribou hides first side up. This creates a surface that is both insulating and comfortable, protecting the sleeper from conductive heat loss to the cold ground while providing the softness necessary for actual rest. The quillik, the traditional seal oil lamp, is positioned carefully on a small stone shelf built into the wall adjacent to the sleeping platform. This lamp is not merely a source of light. It is the heart of the shelter's heating system, a cooking device, and a tool for drying wet clothing. The quillik is carved from soapstone, a soft metamorphic rock that the elder brought with him from the coast. The lamp is roughly semicircular, perhaps 30 centimeters long, with a shallow bowl carved to hold seal oil. The edge of the bowl is carved with a slight lip, and along this lip, the elder carefully positions a wick made from Arctic cotton, the fluffy seed heads of a tundra plant that burns slowly when saturated with oil. The physics of the quillik reveal sophisticated understanding of combustion and heat management. Seal oil, primarily composed of unsaturated fats, has a high energy density. 1 liter of seal oil contains approximately 34 megajoules of energy, comparable to diesel fuel. However, unlike a wood fire, which produces intense heat for a short period, the Kulik produces a moderate heat that can be precisely controlled by adjusting the wick. Too large a flame wastes precious fuel and produces smoke. Too small a flame provides insufficient heat. The elder maintains the flame at the perfect size, trimming the cotton wick with a small stick and adjusting the oil level with practiced precision. The heat from the Kulik rises in a gentle convection current, warming the air in the upper portion of the shelter where the sleeping platform is located. The elder calculates fuel consumption with the precision of an engineer. A single Kulik, burning continuously, consumes approximately 1 liter of seal oil every 30 hours. Over a 4-month period of total darkness, he will need roughly 100 liters of oil to maintain a survivable interior temperature. This calculation has driven his summer activities. The long hours spent hunting seals on the coastal ice, the careful rendering of blubber into clear oil, the storage of this precious fuel in seal stomach containers that keep it fresh and prevent evaporation. But what happens when the darkness deepens and the cold intensifies to the point where even the Kulik struggles to maintain warmth? The elder knows that survival requires layers of defense, redundancy built into every system. He wears clothing that functions as a portable shelter, engineered with the same sophistication as the dwelling itself. The foundation is the inner parka, the atigi, worn with the fur facing inward against the skin. This is made from caribou hide, taken from animals killed in early autumn when their fur is at its thickest. The hide is scraped thin using an ulu, a semicircular knife that allows for precise control. The scraping must remove all fat, as any remaining fat will eventually turn rancid and rot the hide, but must not damage the roots of the hair shafts. This requires hours of patient work, scraping and checking, feeling the hide's thickness with fingertips sensitive enough to detect differences of a fraction of a millimeter. Once properly prepared, the hide is cut into pattern pieces using measurements refined over thousands of years. The Inuit pattern for a parka is not arbitrary. It is biomechanically optimized to allow full range of motion while eliminating any gaps where cold air might penetrate. The body of the parka is slightly oversized, creating an air gap between the fur and the skin. This trapped air, warmed by body heat, provides an additional insulation layer. The sleeves are cut with a slight curve, matching the natural position of arms in use, and are tight at the wrists where they meet the mitts. The hood is large and deep, extending forward to protect the face while allowing the wearer to turn their head inside the hood without the hood itself turning. This means the fur lining of the hood always surrounds the face, maintaining warm air around the most vulnerable area. The stitching of the parka reveals the sophistication of Inuit textile engineering. The seams are sewn using sinew thread and a double stitching technique that makes them both strong and waterproof. The first row of stitches joins the pieces in the conventional manner, but then a second row is added, with the stitches offset from the first row and pulled extremely tight. As the sinew dries, it shrinks slightly, pulling the 2 rows together and creating a seam that sheds water and blocks wind absolutely. The stitches are small and regular, perhaps 5 to 6 stitches per centimeter, requiring hours of patient work in the dim light of the summer twilight. Over the inner parka, the elder wears an outer parka, identical in construction, but with the fur facing outward. This dual layer system creates an air gap between the 2 parkas, and this gap provides additional insulation while also allowing moisture to escape. The body continuously produces water vapor, even in extreme cold, and this vapor must be managed or it will condense and freeze within the fur, destroying its insulating properties. The air gap allows this moisture to migrate outward, where it eventually escapes through the outer parka or freezes on its surface, where it can be beaten off with a stick. The trousers follow similar principles, made from caribou hide with the fur facing inward and designed to overlap with the parka at the waist, preventing any gap. They are held up with a drawstring made from braided sinew, and the legs are tucked into boots that represent perhaps the pinnacle of Inuit cold weather engineering. These boots, called kamik, are made from sealskin for the leg portion, and from tough bearded sealskin for the soles. The construction requires expertise that takes years to develop. The seamstress, often the elder's wife before his exile, would have spent days on a single pair of boots. The sole is cut from the thick skin of the bearded seal's belly, where the hide is tough enough to resist abrasion, yet flexible enough to allow normal walking. This hide is carefully depilated using a scraping technique that removes the hair without damaging the skin structure. The hide is then chewed, literally chewed by human teeth, to soften it. Saliva contains enzymes that break down some of the collagen fibers, and the mechanical action of chewing works the fibers, making the hide supple. This process takes hours, and the result is a sole that is waterproof, flexible, and durable. The leg portion of the boot is made from sealskin with the fur facing inward. The seams joining the sole to the leg are triple stitched using a specialized technique that makes them absolutely waterproof. The stitching is done with the sinew thread soaked in water, because wet sinew is more pliable and easier to work with. As it dries, it shrinks and tightens, sealing the holes created by the needle. The thread is passed through the same hole multiple times, creating a dense mesh that water cannot penetrate. The top of the boot reaches just below the knee and is tied with a drawstring that seals it against the trouser leg. Inside the boots, the elder wears socks made from Arctic hare fur, the softest and warmest fur available. These socks are changed daily, with the damp pair hung near the qualic to dry, while a fresh pair is worn. Foot care is critical in the extreme cold. Wet feet lose heat rapidly and are susceptible to frostbite. The elder checks his feet multiple times each day, looking for any signs of numbness or discoloration that might indicate the beginning of cold injury. The hands are protected by a two-layer mitt system. The inner mitts are made from caribou hide with fur inward, light and flexible enough to allow some dexterity. The outer mitts are made from sealskin, waterproof, and wind-resistant. Unlike gloves, which separate the fingers and reduce warmth, mitts keep all fingers together, allowing them to share heat. The mitts are attached to the parka sleeves with leather thongs, preventing loss if they are removed. A seal hunter knows that losing a mitt in a blizzard is a death sentence, but clothing and shelter alone are not sufficient for survival through the polar night. The elder needs food, and in the depths of winter, food is scarce. The sea ice, which forms thick and stable by mid-autumn, becomes his hunting ground. Beneath this ice, in the dark waters of the Arctic Ocean, the seals maintain breathing holes that they keep open throughout the winter by repeatedly surfacing and breaking through the forming ice with their heads. These breathing holes, called aglut in Inuktitut, are the foundation of winter seal hunting. Finding an aglu requires intimate knowledge of seal behavior and ice formation patterns. Seals prefer to maintain breathing holes where the ice is thinnest, typically in areas of current or near cracks that form as the ice shifts with tides and wind. The elder walks across the sea ice with a long bone probe, testing the snow surface. Where a breathing hole exists below, the accumulated snow and frost create a slight dome, invisible to the untrained eye, but detectable by feel. He finds one and begins the long wait. Yes, seal hunting at a breathing hole in winter is an exercise in absolute patience and environmental hardness. The elder positions himself beside the hole, sitting on a small caribou hide pad for insulation from the ice. He holds a harpoon, a sophisticated weapon consisting of a long wooden shaft with a detachable head carved from walrus ivory. The harpoon head is attached to a long line made from braided seal skin, which in turn is attached to a drag float made from an inflated seal bladder. The physics of the harpoon are elegant. The detachable head is designed to rotate sideways after striking, preventing the seal from pulling free. The elder sits motionless for hours. The temperature is -65°C. The wind, though light, finds every microscopic gap in his clothing. His breath forms a cloud of ice crystals that drifts away and falls as tiny snow. He cannot move because seals can detect vibration through the ice from remarkable distances. He cannot smoke or eat because any scent might alert the seal. He simply waits, listening for the subtle sound of water movement or the explosion of breath that signals a seal surfacing at the hole. The wait might last 2 hours or 12. The elder's body enters a state of controlled hypothermia, reducing his metabolic rate to conserve energy, while his core temperature drops slightly but remains above the dangerous threshold. This is not something he does consciously. It is an adaptation, a physiological response that his body has learned through decades of similar exposure. When the seal finally surfaces, the moment of action lasts perhaps 2 seconds. The elder drives the harpoon down through the breathing hole with explosive force, feeling the resistance as the ivory head penetrates seal skin and flesh. The seal dives immediately, pulling the line, but the toggling head prevents escape. The drag float creates resistance, tiring the seal, and eventually the elder can widen the breathing hole with his ice chisel and extract his prey. A single seal represents survival for weeks. The meat provides protein and essential fats. The blubber is rendered into oil for the kulak. The hide can be used for repairs to clothing or shelter. The bones are tools, needles, and structural elements. The intestines, carefully cleaned, become waterproof windows for the shelter, allowing daylight to enter during the brief periods when the sun approaches the horizon. The stomach becomes a container for oil storage. Nothing is wasted because waste is death. The elder processes the seal inside his shelter, using an ulu knife that he keeps razor sharp with a whetstone. He butchers with precision, born of necessity, separating the blubber from the meat in continuous strips, cutting the meat into portions that will freeze solid and remain preserved in the natural freezer that is winter. Some meat is eaten raw, frozen, cut into thin slices that melt on the tongue and provide both nutrition and hydration. Since melting ice for water requires precious fuel. Raw frozen caribou, or seal, called quack, is not a primitive practice, but an intelligent adaptation. The freezing preserves nutrients that would be destroyed by cooking. And the consumption of raw meat provides moisture that would otherwise need to be obtained by melting snow, a process that consumes significant energy.
The mountain spirits watched,
The cycle of days becomes a blur during the polar night. Without sunrise or sunset to mark time, the elder maintains routine through discipline.
Cold and
He rises at
unseen,
what he has decided is
listening for
morning,
the cracking
lights
snow.
the kulak if it has gone out during sleep,
Wind,
checks his
the
clothing for ice
spirits of the
accumulation
north
or damage,
called
eats a
Kiviok.
small meal of frozen meat, and
I
then
remember
begins the
their
day's
voices
tasks.
in the frozen
These
winds.
tasks might include hunting, repairing
The
equipment,
mountain stands
checking the
to
shelter
the
for
north,
wind damage, or simply
guiding the
maintaining the
waters.
psychological discipline necessary to
Follow
avoid
the
the despair that can accompany such profound isolation. The darkness itself becomes a presence, and not just the absence of light, but a palpable entity that presses against the mind. The elder combats this through story and memory. In the Inuit tradition, winter is the time for telling stories, for passing down the knowledge and history of the people. Alone in his exile, the elder tells these stories to himself, speaking them aloud in the empty shelter, hearing his own voice as a defense against the silence. He recalls the story of Kiviok, the hero who traveled across the Arctic encountering spirits and challenges, using his wits to survive. He recites the precise location of every cache, every landmark, every safe route across his traditional territory, committing this information to memory in a culture that possessed no written language, but whose oral tradition preserved knowledge with astonishing accuracy. The cold reaches its deepest point in late January and early February. The temperature drops to -73 degrees Celsius, so cold that the elder can hear the trees cracking in the distant river valleys, so cold that his breath sounds crystalline, a tinkling as the water vapor freezes instantly. At this temperature, the kulak struggles to maintain warmth in the shelter. The elder responds by sealing himself into the sleeping area with additional caribou hides hung as curtains, creating a smaller space that his body heat and the Quillic can warm adequately.
The ice will
He
break
emerges
soon.
only for necessary
Then the
tasks,
seals will come,
moving quickly
and
to
the birds.
minimize heat loss. This
must
is the
be
time
ready.
of greatest danger, when a small mistake can cascade into catastrophe. If the Quillic goes out due to lack of oil or wick problems, the interior temperature will plummet. If clothing becomes wet from perspiration or accident, it will freeze solid and lose all insulating value. If frostbite begins in a toe or finger, it can spread. The elder's survival depends on constant vigilance, on catching problems when they are small before they become fatal. As February progresses, the first hints of returning light appear. The horizon develops a faint glow for a few minutes each day, a blue twilight that grows longer and brighter as the sun approaches. The elder emerges from his shelter during these twilight periods, standing on the sea ice and turning his face toward where the sun will eventually
Almost finished.
rise. The light,
This will
even this
hold.
pale precursor, affects him profoundly.
We can go
His
in the
mood
morning.
lifts. His energy increases.
I must choose
He
between my
begins to plan
honor
for spring,
and my people.
for the time when the ice will break and the seals will
But
haul
what
out
if there
to
is
bask,
another way?
when birds will return and the tundra will explode with brief life. The return of the sun in late February is not a single moment, but a process that unfolds over days. First, the tip of the solar disk appears on the horizon for just a few minutes. Then, day by day, more of the sun becomes visible, and the period of daylight extends. The elder watches this process with emotions that blend joy, relief, and something deeper, a confirmation of the cosmic order, proof that the world continues its ancient cycles, and that his survival, his knowledge, his adherence to the ways of his ancestors has been validated. As the light returns and temperatures moderate to a relatively balmy -40 degrees Celsius, the elder begins to emerge more frequently.
We
He
crush
hunts
the
with
leaves
renewed
like
energy,
this,
building
careful
up
not
food
to
stores
lose the
depleted
oils.
over the dark months. Yet he
This is
repairs
the
his
living
equipment,
knowledge,
preparing for
connecting
spring
our
travel.
past.
He considers his exile and whether there might be a path toward reconciliation with his community. These are questions for the light, for the time when interaction with others becomes possible again. The survival of an exiled Inuit elder through the polar night in temperatures reaching -73 degrees Celsius is not miraculous. It is engineering. It is the application of knowledge accumulated over thousands of
Almost
years
finished.
of human habitation in the most
This will
extreme
hold.
environment on Earth. Every aspect of the
We
elder's
can go in the
survival
morning.
strategy, from the spiral construction of his shelter's snow layer to the double-layer parka system, from the patience required for seal hunting to the psychological discipline necessary
The
to
ice will
endure
break
absolute
soon.
isolation in
Then the
absolute
seals will
darkness.
come,
I
and the
represent
birds.
sophisticated problem-solving
We
and
must be
deep
ready.
understanding of physics, biology, and human psychology. The Inuit culture that produced this knowledge did not simply adapt to the Arctic. They mastered it, creating technologies and techniques that allowed not just survival, but the flourishing of a rich culture in conditions that seem incompatible with human life. The story of the elder is not ancient history. It is living knowledge, still practiced in modified forms today, a testament to human ingenuity and the profound connection between a people and their land.